Nigerian DSS arrests Sowore as he arrives Nigeria. They seized his passport and later released him. According to report from our reliable source, Nigerian political activist Omoyele Sowore was arrested by the Department of State Services (DSS) upon his arrival in Nigeria from the United States of America. He was arrested at the Murtala Mohammed International Airport in Lagos following his return from the US. Some reporters had previously disclosed that DSS planned to arrest Sowore upon his return, having placed him on a watch list. Shortly after his arrest, Sowore was released by immigration authorities and his passport was returned. Sowore is the leader of the Revolution Now movement, which is critical of the Nigerian government. The report alleged that Bola Tinubu, former Lagos State Governor and current President of Nigeria, and his policies are the reasons behind the economic hardship leading to protests. Previously, Sowore had been unable to leave Nigeria or visit his family in the US for over 5 years due to restriction on his travel documents. The DSS is criticized for targeting peaceful protesters like Sowore while allegedly ignoring larger security threats such as terrorism and banditry. The report suggests widespread public discontent due to economic hardship, which is fueling protests and unrest. Sowore emphasizes that if peaceful protests are suppressed, it may lead to violent uprising. Sowore's repeated detention by the Nigerian Department of State Services (DSS) highlights the tension between the government and its critics. Sowore, a well-known advocate for government accountability and democracy, has been a target of the authorities due to his activism, which calls for systematic change in Nigeria. His movement, Revolution Now, has consistently challenged the Nigerian government and their handling of corruption, security, and economic instability. From a critical point of view, this incident touches on a fundamental issue: the conflict between state power and individual rights. Sowore's detention without clear charges symbolizes the state's tendency to suppress dissent, a practice seen not only in Nigeria but in other authoritarian regimes worldwide. His passport seizure is a control tactic, effectively limiting his freedom of movement and signaling that the government is watching him closely. However, what stands out in this case is the inconsistency of the law's application. Sowore's eventual release, despite being held repeatedly, suggests that the Nigerian government is unable to provide concrete legal grounds for his continued detention. Critics often argue that the Nigerian state uses its security apparatus not to protect the nation but to silence voices that seek to expose its failings. The use of the DSS to handle political dissent set a dangerous precedent for the future of Nigerian democracy. However, I would like to emphasize the role of people's power in resisting government tyranny. This is an important concept in any democratic society. When the government fails or when the government fears its people, there is a system of checks and balances allowing for liberty and justice. However, when the people fear the government, the system becomes tyrannical. This analysis draws from classical political theory, particularly the works of John Locke, who advocated for the separation of powers and the importance of civil society in keeping the government in check. In the Nigerian context, the continued detention and harassment of activists like Sowore reflects a breakdown in this balance, where the government wields disproportionate power over its citizens. However, I would like to assert that people must continue to rise and ask questions which resonate with democratic principles. It also highlights the growing disillusionment among many Nigerians, particularly younger generations, who feel that the country is failing to provide basic rights and services. This disillusionment is amplified by the government's perceived ineptitude in addressing insecurity, corruption, and economic decline. A fascinating critique in this report is the distinction made between the older generation and the youth. The older Nigerian seems resigned to the status quo, while the younger generation is more critical and outspoken. This generational divide can be attributed to several factors. The older generation has lived through military dictatorship, civil unrest, and long periods of economic hardship. Many may feel that questioning the government could lead to more instability, which they are keen to avoid. Their silence, therefore, is a survival mechanism rather than a sign of agreement with the government's action. On the other hand, the younger generation has grown up in an era of democracy but feels betrayed by its promises. They see rampant corruption, high unemployment, and insecurity, leading them to be more critical and vocal. This generational conflict plays a crucial role in understanding the political dynamics in Nigerians today. I also criticize those who are not critical thinkers and those who refuse to question authorities. They portray this as a systematic issue where a lack of critical engagement perpetuates government abuses. This can be seen as a critique of the political culture in Nigeria, where citizens have been conditioned to accept the status quo rather than to challenge it. One of the key themes in this analysis is fear. Fear of the state, fear of reprisal, fear of speaking out. Sowore's detention is used as a warning to others. If you criticize the state, you will face consequences. This tactic, while effective, is silencing some, also stokes anger and resentment among others. Fear can be a powerful tool for government to maintain control, but it also erodes trust in institutions. When citizens fear their government, they are less likely to cooperate with it, leading to a breakdown in social cohesion. In Nigeria, this fear is compounded by a sense of helplessness as citizens feel that their voices are not heard and their concerns are not addressed. The news report also discussed the state of insecurity in Nigeria, particularly the government failure to combat banditry, terrorism, and kidnapping. Despite numerous promises, the government has not made significant progress in addressing these issues. This ties back to the larger theme of governance failure. Critics argue that the Nigerian government's inability to protect its citizens is one of the key reasons why movements like Revolution Now gain traction. When people feel unsafe in their own country, they begin to question the legitimacy of the state. In Nigeria, this insecurity is not just a product of criminal activity, but also a result of government negligence. The mention of communities being wiped out by terrorists without any arrest being made is a stark reminder of the government's failure to ensure justice. This fosters a sense of impunity where criminals operate freely, knowing that they are unlikely to face consequences. For citizens, this creates a feeling of abandonment by the state. I call for Nigerians to ask questions. This is a powerful critique of the political culture that discourages scrutiny. Asking questions is a fundamental part of democratic engagement. It is how citizens hold their leaders accountable in Nigeria. However, asking questions can be dangerous as those who challenge the status quo often face harassment or worse. The call to ask questions is not just about holding the government accountable, but about shifting the mindset of Nigerians. I want to criticize the culture of silence and complacency that has allowed corruption and mismanagement to flourish. By asking questions, citizens can begin to demand better governance and a more transparent political system. How does Sowore's detention affect the average Nigerian? What does it say about the state of democracy in the country? How can citizens begin to reclaim their power in a system that seems rigged against them? The final takeaway from this discussion is that Nigeria is at a critical junction. The government's continuous suppression of dissent, coupled with its failure to address pressing issues like insecurity and corruption, poses a serious threat to the country's future. However, change is possible if citizens continue to ask questions and demand better from their leaders. That is the end of our news update. Your comments and opinions will help to shape this ongoing discussion. I will see you again in my next update. Enjoy the rest of your day.